And let's do our prayer for study. We have tons to talk about today. Christ, my Lord, the giver of light and wisdom, who opened the eyes of the blind man and transformed the fishermen into wise heralds and teachers of the gospel through the coming of the Holy Spirit, shine also in my mind the light of the grace of the Holy Spirit. Grant me discernment, understanding, and wisdom in learning. Enable me to complete my assignments and to abound in every good work. For to you I give honor and glory. Amen. Most blessed Lord, send the grace of your Holy Spirit on me to strengthen me, that I may learn well the subject I am about to study, and by it become a better person. For your glory, the comfort of my family, and the benefit of your church and our nation. Amen. Okay. For time constraints, I'm not going to come around and inspect your summaries of Huckleberry Finn. At some point, I have to trust that you will do it. But if you're writing a paragraph on each chapter, you're writing too much. And if you're writing 3 words, you're not writing enough. Somewhere in between those two is the sweet spot that we are shooting for. What? 1.5 sentences. Oh, yeah, 1.5 sentences. Full sentences are nice. It's nice to have complete sentences, I feel. It is a habit that some people have to get back into because of, I won't go off on my texting rant, but I want to. All right, let's take a look at a poem. There is something different about this poem that we have not previously met. And I can't find it. But okay, page 151. I'm going to read this poem, and I want you to listen or think about if you see a way this poem is different than every other poem we've read so far. Also, this is kind of a difficult poem. So I want to know what you think the vibe is. Is he happy or sad? Are things good or bad? And see if you can think why he thinks that, maybe. That's it, just very, very broad. Okay, here we go. By the way, maybe you know this, you probably do, but it's worth telling you. Dover is an English port city, and it is well known for having cliffs right next to the beach area that are white. They're like limestone, chalky cliffs, and I got to be there, and I sailed away to go to France across the English Channel, and I'll be doggone, we pulled away, and there's those white cliffs of Dover. They're white. They're just glaringly, beautifully white. So this is where he is. He's at the beach at Dover. Okay, here we go. The sea is calm tonight. The tide is full. The moon lies fair upon the straits. On the French coast, the light gleams and is gone. The cliffs of England stand, glimmering and vast, out in the tranquil bay. Come to the window, sweet is the night air. Only from the long line of spray where the sea meets the moon-blanched land, listen. You hear the grating roar of pebbles which the waves draw back and fling at their return upon the high strand. Begin and cease, and then again begin, with tremulous cadence slow, and bring the eternal note of sadness in. Sophocles long ago heard it on the Aegean, and it brought into his mind the turbid ebb and flow of human misery. We find also in the sound a thought, hearing it by this distant northern sea. The sea of faith was once too at the full, and the round earth's shore lay like the folds of a bright girdle furled. But now I only hear its melancholy, long, withdrawing roar, retreating to the breath of the night wind, down the vast edges drear and naked shingles of the world. Ah, let us be true to one another. For the world which seems to lie before us like a land of dreams, so various, so beautiful, so new, hath really neither joy, nor love, nor light, nor certitude, nor peace, nor help for pain. And we are here as on a darkling plain, swept with confused alarms of struggle and flight. where ignorant armies clash by night. Is the speaker seem like he's in a good mood and happy or not? What makes you think so?
Just like the way he speaks, it just seems like kind of like a long forgotten memories, and he has like are unable to return to kind of.
Okay, yeah.
But then also the fact that he uses quotes like the eternal note of sadness and stuff.
Yeah. And he says, he talks about the ebb and flow of human misery that Sophocles heard. And then at the end, this is terrible. We are here as on a darkling plain, swept with confused alarms of struggle and flight, where ignorant armies clash by night. Would you like to be in the middle of a battle in the dark? No thanks. It doesn't sound like a good place to be. Ignorant armies. Ignorant of what? Of who the enemy is, maybe? Of where they are? I don't know. Does not sound good. So, I don't think so. I don't know, but I don't think so. So he's at the beach. And have y'all been to the ocean? Okay. If you have, you know what the ocean does. And it does it much more so than any, even like Lake Michigan or any that has waves, kind of. But the waves come in and, they fling stuff up the beach, right? But then if you stand on the sand at the part that's getting covered with water, right? What happens to you when the water goes back out again, the wave goes back out? What happens to your feet? You're standing in the sand and the wave comes in and then you get a little buried, but sometimes not. Sometimes something else happens. It sucks the sand out from under your feet sometimes. And you kind of, like you're going to fall down. Everybody looks a little drunk at the seaside, I feel like, because it's like nobody can stand up. Maybe I can't. Anyway. And part of it's because the waves whack you and knock you down, and you think they're not as big as they are, and then they whack you and knock you down. But also it's the sucking of the sand from under your feet, and suddenly you're not standing on anything anymore, and your feet aren't at the same level anymore. And so he says, the sea meets the sand, and you hear the grating roar of pebbles, and then it begins and ceases and begins again. And he says, there's something else, because the sea, the sea is all connected to each other, right? I hate to point this out to you. Already realizes, what?
They're all connected.
Seas are all connected. And so there used to be something else all around the world that was connected in this poem. And he says, it's all we have left of its retreating roar. It's the sucking sound, the sucking feeling of the sand being sucked out from under your feet. What other kind of sea is he talking about?
Sea of faith.
The sea of faith. Faith, religion, Christianity, it's being sucked out from under our feet. And of course, what did we say happens to you when the sand gets sucked out? You fall. You lose your bearings, you lose your equilibrium, and you tend to fall. So he says the sea of faith was once at the full, like high tide, the sea of faith, round the earth's shore. But now I only hear its melancholy, long withdrawing roar, retreating. So we're in the mid-1800s here. What have people been talking about for a couple hundred years now that might make someone feel like the sea of faith is just being sucked away from under our feet?
Perhaps God isn't real.
And do we need God if we can explain everything scientifically? I mean, we do. That's the right answer. But might some people think we don't? Science, right? The Enlightenment. We're going to test it in a lab. We're going to measure it and weigh it and observe it and dissect it. and we'll know how it works. And in the meantime, we learn more and more and more facts, but don't have anything to believe in. You are, I'm sure, fully aware of this, but in the mid-1800s, Charles Darwin, which kind of put the last suck, on the sand of the sea of faith for a lot of people. Because we explain how, this phenomenon occurs and that phenomenon occurs, and gravity, and now, apparently the sun is in the middle, and we've tested all these hypotheses. And then finally a guy says, you know what? I'm pretty sure we could explain the existence of humanity also without God. And the people who were hearing him took it quite seriously. Like, that is highly damaging to Christianity. So all of these ideas are swirling around, and Matthew Arnold writes about the sea of faith being sucked away. What's his solution? What are we going to do about this? How do we live when the sea of faith is sucked out and the sand is being sucked away and you don't know where to stand? What do we have left?
Others.
Apparently, his wife or his girlfriend relationship. Let us be true to one another. For the world, it seems beautiful, but it hath neither joy, nor love, nor light, nor certitude, nor peace, nor help for pain. What a horrible thing to say. Think about it. The world doesn't have joy, love, light, certitude, peace, or help for pain. What are we like? We're the ignorant armies in the dark. So, I don't know. How do we live? Let us be true to one another. Do you like his? Is it a good solution?
I mean, it only really applies to them, though. It wouldn't apply to everyone else.
Are they going to make their own reality, maybe? And live in their own little bubble?
The only way you would do it if you didn't want to do it that way.
What happens if one of them isn't there anymore? The other one's not going to have anything left to stand on. It's not a very sure foundation, is it? It's very depressing. Sorry. I would like you to read it again this week, at least once, if not more, though, despite the depression. Now, I asked you another question at the beginning. I made a comment. This poem is different from every other poem we've read so far this year. Did anybody pick out how it's different? It's not the subject.
Just like the way it was like told, it felt more like a story than in a poem.
Okay. Dominic, what about it makes it more like somebody just telling a story?
Like the way it flows, like the way you speak, kind of like Sophocles long ago, heard it on me, brought it to his mind, interpreted ebb and flow. Like just that sentence just sounds something like you would hear in a tale, rather than like what you would hear in a poem from someone. These poems usually are more, I guess, about the emotions of the flow of the emotions.
Okay, so, do I hear you correctly? It's very matter of fact. He's speaking in a more matter of fact way, and not a fancy figurative way. Is that?
Yeah.
Does that? Yes. Look at this poem on the page. What does it look like? You're like, Mrs. Ferguson, it looks like words. What are you asking me?
Waves.
Oh, maybe. Okay, let's turn back. Oh, everybody go back to page 109, because that's just the first thing I grabbed. Look at the charge of the Light Brigade. Fold your paper over. See what I did? So I can see the charge of the Light Brigade and Dover Beach at the same time. What's different? How do they look different?
They're not all about almost the same size.
The stanzas aren't even. Does Dover Beach rhyme?
Oh, I mean, it has a few, like,
It has a few.
but it's not like the main
It's not
thing.
exactly. And then also like the endings of the every line. They're not all exactly like rhyming in a certain way.
Right. And are the lines all the same length?
No.
No. So, do they all have the same number of syllables?
No.
So, is there a meter with a certain number? It's our first free verse poem. There's no structure to this poem. I mean, when he wants there to be, there is a little bit. He can throw some meter in for a few lines. He can do a little bit of rhyming if he wants. And that's what gives it that effect that Dominic was talking about, that conversational, sort of matter of fact. It's just like talking because it's not structured. Now, last question, and then I promise you we will move on from Dover Beach. What could be significant about a poem, about the content of this poem? Think about what we said it's about, and the fact that it has no form. Are those two things related in any way? What it's about and the fact that it doesn't have a form. It doesn't have a structure, right? A meter and a rhyme scheme and everything. How are those related?
Well, I mean, like, I think it's saying God doesn't have a structure.
The world is falling apart. My poem is falling apart. Kind of. Now, a lot of people, I mean, free verse became very popular, and Walt Whitman was writing in free verse in Leaves of Grass. But I don't think it's an accident. I don't love it. But I don't think it's an accident, yes.
The whole thing kind of feels like a conversation between like two people.
But and one of them we don't get to meet because he turns to her apparently and talks to her every once in a while. But we're not there. Yes, it sounds just like a conversation that people would have. Because I don't know about you, probably you don't structure your conversations with meter and rhyme. If you do, I would really like to witness that. But, okay, Dover Beach. We are getting into what we would consider quite modern poetry. With free verse, we're going to choose sometimes to not have any structured constraints, and we're just going to rhyme if we want to and not if we don't. And our lines can be of any length. Okay, next up, I want to look at Lincoln's first inaugural. First, let's answer the questions. And then I want to look at how he appealed to his audience, which would be all of America, but particularly the people who might be upset that he's been elected president. Okay, but the first question, what is causing apprehension among the southern states? Gabriel.
This like anti-slavery president is in charge now, and they fear that they're gonna lose it.
Yeah, he's going to come take all our stuff. On page 143, the third paragraph, he says, apprehension seems to exist among the people of the southern states that by the accession of a Republican administration, their property and their peace and personal security are to be endangered. There's never been any reasonable cause for such apprehension. Indeed, the most ample evidence to the contrary has all the while existed and been open to their inspection. It is found in nearly all the published speeches of him who now addresses you. Guys, I said this over and over while I was campaigning. The speeches have been published. I said I'm not going to mess with slavery in the southern states. Okay, next question. I've numbered my answers, but they're not the right numbers. Does Lincoln believe that the United States can be divided whenever anyone wants? Can the United States just split?
No,
No, why not?
because a house divided by itself cannot stand.
Okay, that is one reason. What's another reason? What's his main reason? Yeah, when we set up a government, we're assuming the government lasts. We read the Constitution together. Did it say anywhere in there, and if people get ticked off and mad, here's how to just break it into pieces. No. We agreed to form a nation. Here's what Lincoln says. I hold that the Constitution of the United States is perpetual. Perpetuity is implied, if not expressed, in the fundamental law of all national governments. It is safe to assert that no government proper ever had a provision in its organic law for its own termination. Governments don't set up, and here's how to get rid of me. Government. He has that reason. He also has another one, top of page 145. Again, if the United States be not a government proper, but an association of states in the nature of contract merely. What if we're just a contract? What if we just made a contract? We're not really a nation. We're just a contract. He says, can it, as a contract, be peaceably unmade by less than all the parties who made it? We all made this contract together. Can some people just say, well, I don't want to be a part of it. I'm done. Your representative signed his name. You're in. You can't just leave. Okay, and then the next paragraph he talks about it, but I want to save that for a minute. Can the parts of the country physically separate? This is not a very hard question. Not without some sort of massive earthquake or act of God. And he says this, he points this out at the bottom of page 147. Physically speaking, we cannot separate. We cannot remove our respective sections from each other, nor build an impassable wall between them. A husband and wife may be divorced and go out of the presence and beyond the reach of each other, but different parts of the country cannot do this. So the rest of that question, will the secession of the South make relations between the parts of the country better or worse?
It'll make it worse.
Oh, it's going to make it worse. He says, is it possible to make that intercourse more advantageous or more satisfactory after separation than before? Can aliens make treaties easier than friends can make laws? Can treaties be more faithfully enforced between aliens than laws can among friends? We can't even get along as we're part of the same country. Do you really think we're going to get along as neighboring countries? It's going to even be worse. It's easier for fellow citizens to pass a law than it is for foreigners to make treaties with each other. This is not going to work. Okay, but the real thing I asked you to do is to tell me when Lincoln is reasoning with us, when he is saying, you should listen to me because I'm a good person to listen to, or when he's appealing to our emotions. And I asked you to mark it down and be ready to tell me. So somebody give me a place where Lincoln is reasoning with them, an appeal to logos. Where is he reasoning?
In the beginning, analysis, like he gives a list, I have no purpose indirectly to do with the institution of slavery, and the next, those who nominated and elected me have full knowledge of what I was doing, which result that maintenance violated all the states, and especially the right of each state, so he's listing like the reasons why he's not gonna just take away slavery.
Yes,
He does
yes.
it like 5 times here, and then there's more.
Yeah, he listed that. Very good, Neil. On page 143, he right out of the gate, that third paragraph I read, he says, you know, there's no reason to be upset because all you got to do is read my speeches, all the speeches that have been published that I made. I said it right there. And then, like Neil said, and then he says, I'm quoting from one of my speeches. And then everybody who elected me has read my speeches. Here is the resolution. Yes, I now reiterate these sentiments, and I only press upon public attention the most conclusive evidence. This is my evidence that I'm not messing with slavery. Do you find another place where Lincoln reasons with them?
At the top of 144.
Okay.
Says that no person held to service or labor in one state under the laws therefore escaping to another shall, in consequence of any law or regulation, be charged to service or labor except on delivered
And what is he quoting from? Look back at the bottom of the previous page. What is he reading from? It's the Constitution. He's reading the Constitution to them. This is the law of the land. This is the law of the land. Calm down. Very good. Yes, he's reasoning with them. This is what our document states. Let me read it to you again. Anybody find another one?
In the next page, 145, descending from these general principles, we find the proposition of legal contemplation. He lists like the difference of like when the Union actually started, that was built before the Constitution. So you can't really like knock out the Union because it was there before using the Constitution because it was there before
Right,
the Constitution.
right. And look at all those dates. 1774, 1776, 17... the Articles of Confederation, and this, and this, and this, and he's listing all of the steps in which a union was formed. Like Neil said, pre-Constitution. Okay, good. I'm sure there are plenty more. Let's see. I marked on page 147, I kind of liked these, at the two bottom paragraphs of 147. He says, one section of our country believes slavery is right and ought to be extended, while the other believes it is wrong and ought not to be extended. This is the only substantial dispute. What is the issue? Let's boil it down. What is the issue? And he boils it down, and then in the next paragraph is the physically speaking, we cannot separate. This is also reasoning with him. Look, think about it, people. You can't move farther away from each other. The people in Kentucky can't move farther away from the people in Ohio. Except I don't think Kentucky was a seceding state.
No.
I'm a little weak on my
I
Civil
think
War.
Kentucky went to the South.
Okay. Okay. How about places where Lincoln highlighted the fact that he is trustworthy? Did anybody find one of those? Yeah, Neil, go for it.
In page 144, I take the official oath today with no mental reservations, no purpose to ensure the Constitution. He also said, I do suggest that it would be much safer for all both official and private stations to inform and abide by. So he's like saying, I'm like worthy for this job.
Yes.
Take it without any problem.
Yes, I have no mental reservations about this. Look at the next paragraph after that. Actually, look at the bottom one on that page. No, that's not what I wanted. That's not what I wanted. I'm sorry. Ignore me. And does anybody else have another pathos? Or ethos, I'm sorry.
In the first page,
Okay.
those who nominated me and elected me did so with full knowledge that I had this, that I had made this and many similar declarations, and I had never recanted them.
So what does that make him sound like?
It makes him sound trustworthy.
Trustworthy, open. I'm not saying one thing while I'm campaigning, and then I get elected. Now I'm gonna do something different. I've been open and above board with everyone. How about page 148? In the tiny paragraph in the middle of 148 that starts the chief magistrate. He says, the chief magistrate derives all his authority from the people, and they have referred none upon him to fix terms for the separation of the states. The people themselves can do this if also they choose, but the executive, remember, read president, as such has nothing to do with it. His duty is to administer the present government as it came into his hands and transmit it unimpaired by him to his successor. So, what is the duty of a president? To take what you've been given, keep it safe, and hand it on to the next guy. He doesn't talk about himself directly, but he is the president in this case. But then on page 145, he actually does talk about it. In the paragraph that starts with, I therefore consider, he says, I shall take care, as the Constitution enjoins upon me, that the laws of the Union be faithfully executed in all the states. Doing this I deem to be only a simple duty on my part, and I shall perform it so far as is practicable, unless my rightful masters, the American people, shall withhold the requisite means. Lincoln knows who the boss is. The American people. My rightful masters. This makes him sound not power hungry, right? I'm going to rip in there. I'm going to rip into the South and just change all their laws. And no. I know my duty. I will faithfully do my duty. It makes him sound trustworthy. Okay, last up. Where does he appeal to people's emotions? Yeah, Gabriel.
The very last sentence
Oh my gosh.
closes it out.
Can we hold that in readiness for a minute? Does anybody want to point out another one? Because I want to finish with that one because it's amazing, that whole paragraph. Let me find a different one.
I think 148, when it appeals to my countrymen, one and all, think calmly and well upon this whole subject. Valuable can be lost by taking time.
Yeah, don't be in a hurry. Don't be in a hurry. Because when we hurry, we do things we can't undo. Indeed, indeed. How about on page 146, he says, second paragraph, there are persons in one section or another who seek to destroy the Union at all events, and are glad of any pretext to do it. I will neither affirm nor deny. But if there be such, I need address no word to them. I'm not talking to the people who've already made up their mind. They're ripping this thing apart. To those, however, who really love the Union, may I not speak. Do you love your country? Then I'm speaking to you. All right, but let's do the one Gabriel pointed out. I'm reading that whole last paragraph. Oh my goodness. I am loath to close. We are not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies. Though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection. The mystic cords of memory, stretching from every battlefield and patriot grave to every living heart stone all over this broad land, will yet swell the chorus of the Union when again touched, as surely they will be, by the better angels of our nature. What the word chords is spelled like that. What does that usually have to do with? What are these chords? What is it? What did you say, Dominic? Music. It's music. It doesn't mean ropes. Chords. Where do these musical chords stretch from and to?
From the American people to the government.
Not from the government.
Not from it.
Oh, yes. No, the government isn't involved.
Is it every battlefield?
Every battlefield and grave of a patriot, straight to a living heart. We're connected to the dead who fought for this country, right? With the mystic chords of memory. But they're musical chords. And he says, someday they'll play again. When, what do they need to strike the chord? Pick a guitar or a harp. What needs to strike the chords, strike the strings again? What is he waiting? Someday this will play that beautiful music again. Will touch those strings of memory. What? This is why grammar, this is why we do grammar. Like, this is the case. What is the going to swell the chorus of the Union? When again touched by the better angels of our nature. When the better angels of our nature touch the strings, we will play, we'll swell the chorus. When our good nature, the better angels of our nature, our good conscience, it's like the little cartoons where the little angel and the little devils. Like, when the better angels of our nature tell us, just put this aside. It's lovely, but it's not reasoning. Like, there's a mystical cord that connects every grave. That's not reasonable. And it has nothing to do with Lincoln whatsoever, right? He's just stepped outside of it. It's pure pathos. Okay, awesome. Let's take a look at the very, very short Gettysburg Address. By the way, I will send out the email. I have had one student do their poem. Okay, okay, I won't preach yet. When we get to April and people still haven't done it, then I'll start being preachy. But the Gettysburg Address is a wonderful thing to memorize. It's not a poem, it's speech, but it counts. Go for it. All my kids memorize the Gettysburg Address. It's a lovely thing to have in your brain. And if you already happen to have it memorized, boom. You're done. Just say it for me, or your mom, or whatever, and have a witness. Okay. To what proposition is our country dedicated? That all men are created equal. What does that have to do with the subject of this speech?
Because of the war they're fighting.
We're fighting a war about whether certain people can be enslaved, whether that's okay. So, dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. What is the purpose of this war, according to Lincoln? What is it testing?
How long the country can endure?
How long? If we can have a country that endures more than 7 years, based on these principles. Yes. Testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. Because we haven't endured very long yet. Somebody who was a little boy when we signed the Declaration of Independence might be an old man now. We have living people that remember. Hasn't been very long. So we're testing whether a country that says all men are created equal will break apart or endure. What does Lincoln ask his audience to do as they leave this battlefield / cemetery? He asks them to do a boatload of stuff, actually, a whole series of things. What does he ask them? Something he asks them to do. Neil.
One of them is to make sure that the men who got killed or died didn't die in vain.
Okay. What else does he ask him to do?
To increase their devotion towards their cause.
Okay. He says, be dedicated to the unfinished work. Be dedicated to the great task. That we take increased devotion from the dead. That we resolve, as Neil said, they shall not have died in vain. Resolve also that this nation shall have a new birth of freedom. Also resolve that government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth. I think I mentioned this last week. You probably all know this, the story of Gettysburg and the guy who spoke for 3 hours before Lincoln. And then Lincoln gets up in this. And at the time, you're like, what was that? Like I barely sat down and he's done talking already. But as people read it and reread it and it was published, people saw how amazing this was. Okay. Does Lincoln reason with them in this speech? Is there any place where he reasons with them?
I think it's mostly the first like little paragraph that he reasons, like technically like saying like, okay, one reason, this country's only been here for like this long, which
Yeah.
is a long time, so we should probably exist longer.
87 years ago, we started an experiment in this country that all men are created equal. But and maybe a little bit in the second paragraph. He says, here's where we are. Here's why we're here. Which one of the three do you think he leans most heavily into? The pathos. That last long paragraph, be dedicated to the great task that they've given the last full measure of devotion. You also be devoted. Even when he starts, he says, we're here to dedicate this ground, but really we can't. Because the brave men living and dead who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. Okay. Is there any ethos? Where is Lincoln in this speech? I mean, I realize he's the one talking. But Where does he draw attention to himself? This may be a trick question.
There's a part where like he's drawing attention to that they're all together, like they're all gathered, like we are all gathered on a great battle of war, that they're all one, they should be united.
We, right? Not I. I am leading you through this terrible time. You can trust me to lead you through this. Lincoln just kind of disappears. And it's we. We are here. We are doing this. I'm one of you. Would it make sense to say his ethos is that he's not there? Like he's just one of them? Do you know, he's not highlighting himself at all. Whereas in the inaugural speech he did. I know my duty. I am faithfully going to discharge my duties. I have written these speeches and you know how I feel about this. And then suddenly in this one he just disappears. And it's only we. How do you think the people listening that day might have felt when the president is one of the we? Is that going to draw people to him or drive them away? We like our leaders to be one of us. We. All right, beautiful. For next week, I want you to read the second inaugural address. And by the way, it's only this. It's really short. And it's got questions I want you to answer. And keep in mind, he doesn't have very long to live. Nobody knows this, but he doesn't have very long to live. Okay. Because I'm sure we will run out of time at the end of class, I'm going to talk about a paper that we're going to work on, but we are not writing it this week. I think I'm going to ask it to be due in 2 weeks. This is a planning week. Now, some of you, I don't know if some of you are, Neil is a senior. Who else is a senior? I have other students that are seniors too. And because often we do papers, I give you papers, and they're very structured, like argue 3 reasons why so-and-so should have done this or that. And it doesn't really prepare you to just write an essay on this topic. And you might, I don't know how to do that. How do I do that? It's very easy. Do it the same way as you do your papers for me. If someone says, write a paper on the symbolism of the Mississippi River in Huckleberry Finn, you're like, oh, I don't know. You don't panic. Think of 3 solid things to say about it. The Mississippi River represents freedom. The Mississippi River represents progress. Whatever. And then write about each one. Examine how Huck grows as a person throughout this book. Find 3 pivotal episodes that show him growing. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah.
That's how you just. And if your teacher, it's not me, says, oh, I want it to be 5 pages or whatever. Well, you need a lot more than 3. Or each of your 3 needs to be embellished in several paragraphs, right? That's all. I'm going to ask for this. Basically, I'm asking you to write a 5-paragraph essay. But this time, these aren't going to be, yes, he should do this, no, he shouldn't do that. It's going to be another topic. Now, before you get upset, maybe you're not upset, maybe you're yay, we get to write something else. I have 5 potential topics. You get to pick one. Just ignore the other ones. I'm giving you 2 today. We'll be finishing Huck Finn this week. All you have to do this week is finish Huck Finn and read that second inaugural. And think about this. I want you to read over the possible topics. I want you to see if one of them jumps out at you. I really like that one. I feel like I have a lot to say about that one. And then after you pick it, you need to think of 3 things. Some of these instructions actually say, like one of them, maybe if I put my glasses in front of my eyes, I could see a little better. Yeah, Huck's conscience, I'll just read the first one. Huck's conscience grows and changes in this book. He struggles with right and wrong frequently. How does Huck grow as a human being? On what is his morality based? In which cases are his decisions sound and in which are they flawed? Write an essay examining several cases where Huck consults his conscience and makes a moral decision and draw a conclusion as to the basis of correctness of his judgment. So it says, examine several cases. Great. Mrs. Ferguson says I only have to examine 3 cases. Does that make sense? So here's what I want you to do. I want you to choose one, and I want you to jot down ideas, like give it a structure. As you finish the book, things might jump out at you. And then bring that. And then I want to know if everybody feels like you have found a topic, if you've chosen one, and if you can think of 3 solid things to say about it. And if you can't, we will help each other. Okay? So you're just jotting down notes and ideas this week. All right, I have no idea how many. 2, 3, 4. There should be the right number of pages. Exactly. All right. When we left off last week, a riverboat man smashed their raft, which apparently riverboatmen like to do. Apparently they run down rafts, which is just mean. But they dove overboard, and Huck ended up knocking at a cabin door. He doesn't know where he is, but he knows he's south of Cairo, and he doesn't know who these people are. And it turns out they're the Grangerfords. The Grangerfords. What is the situation with the Grangerfords?
It's like they call them like aristocracy around them, and they're feuding with another.
Okay. So there's some sort of local nobility. And they dress nice, and they have really good manners, and the sons all toast their father, and the father toasts to them, and they give non-alcoholic substitutes to Buck and Huck and the rest of them, and they're just all very proper. But what do they do in their spare time? They shoot Shepherdsons, and vice versa. The Shepherdsons shoot Grangerfords. This is their sport. Okay, I'll read this first. Next Sunday, we all went to church, about 3 miles, everybody on horseback. The men took their guns along, so did Buck, and kept them between their knees or stood them handy against the wall. The Shepherdsons done the same. It's pretty ornery preaching, all about brotherly love and such like tiresomeness, but everybody said it was a good sermon, and they all talked it over going home and had such a powerful lot to say about faith and good works and free grace and predestination, and I don't know what all, that it did seem to me to be one of the roughest Sundays I'd yet run across. All right. What is ironic in that paragraph?
That they're preaching about like being nice and brotherhood, but then just...
Oh, that was a good sermon. That was a good sermon about brotherly love. Well, we take our guns to church because the Shepherdsons may be hiding behind a tree on the way home. Do the Grangerfords, we only meet the Grangerfords. Okay, so we can only judge. We can assume the Shepherdsons are the same. Do the Grangerfords seem to understand those two things don't go together?
No, not at all.
That you shouldn't go to church and hear, oh, it's good brotherly love, and then, oh, I shot one of those Shepherdsons on the way home. Good for me.
Mom, there's Shepherdsons.
Yeah. They don't really understand. So somebody remind me, how does it all unravel? What happens to make the whole situation unravel? Do you remember? Okay, let Gabriel do it.
Okay, like a Romeo and Juliet type.
It's a Romeo and Juliet scenario, indeed. The Grangerford daughter is in love with the Shepherdson guy, and they have decided to run off together. And it all breaks loose. By the way, before we move on and away from the Shepherdsons and Grangerfords, can we talk about Emmeline Grangerford? Emmeline is the dead daughter who apparently really liked to draw pictures of people in mourning. You know, Charles Addams, you know, of the Addams family, but it was cartoons first. If you've ever seen any of his artwork, or Edmund Gorey, it's all very creepy and weird and just kind of not in good taste always. And so she drew this kind of pictures, and then she wrote poems about anybody who died. And then Huck felt bad she didn't have a poem, so he tried to read her a poem, but he's not good at it. Why? I don't even know what question to ask. Why is this? She is a character in the book, even though she's dead. They talk about her a good lot. You know, they've got that unfinished picture behind the curtain that she didn't finish, so it's got various sets of arms because she was going to erase the one she didn't want. And Huck says creepy with all those arms. Okay, so he makes it sound funny. Huck laughs about it. But is Huck moved by this girl? Like, does he feel respect for her? He does. He really wow, there's no telling what she could have done if she had lived. Look what she'd already, the artistic output from this girl was amazing. And of course, it wasn't particularly, apparently. And that he wants to write her a poem, but he just doesn't feel like he has the skills. Why do you think she appeals to Huck? I mean, I'm not even sure I have an answer to that question. I'm not fishing for anything. Yes. Huck has had not a very good life. Now, this, I'm really glad Dominic said that, because it also takes me into something else I wanted to mention. Up until this point, I might get answers from both sides. This is debatable. In your opinion, up until that point, the Shepherds and Grangerford point, do you think this book has been more leaning towards kind of funny or more leaning towards really serious? I told you it's debatable, so I guess I'm willing to collect any opinion.
Satire comedy.
Kind of, you know, like, did bad things happen before this? Yeah, I mean those murderers on the wrecked ship, and they're going to leave that guy to drown, and then they got left, and apparently they all drowned. Like, it's not good. And his dad, lest we forget the undercurrent. It's like, oh, we're on a raft, we're larking around, it's wonderful, we're having a good time. But why is Huck on that raft running away? Because what's his dad like? Gabriel just said it.
He's not good.
He's a horrible human being. He is highly abusive. He tried to kill Huck with a knife in some sort of drunken fantasy. He locks him up days at a time. And is trying to steal his money. He's a horrible man. And he beats Huck when he's not abandoning him to live in the streets, to sleep in barrels or whatever. I mean, it's kind of, oh, we're having a good time, but it's always this kind of hovering, right? Why is Jim on that raft? Because what was going to happen to him?
He was going to get sent down to New Orleans.
Sold down the river. And he's on the run, but he's leaving his wife and children behind right now. He hopes he'll connect with them. So, you know, like there's this aura of, this isn't a particularly good thing. But it's sort of, oh, wasn't this funny? And I marked it, but I hate that I didn't read it. The conversation they have about Solomon and all his children, and Solomon, this is my favorite point in this whole book. It's like, you don't understand the worth of a child. You got a million of them running around. It's like, half a child ain't no good. It comes from the way Solomon was raised. You don't understand the worth of a child. Oh, yes. Why don't they, you know, is a cat a person? which shows Jim is not incapable of reasoning. It's very reasonable. It's like, you know, Huck's like, well, cats don't talk like, well, are Frenchmen cats? Are they human beings? Then they should talk like human beings. Okay, so anyway, so we have moments like that. Now suddenly we get to the Grangerfords and the Shepherdsons, and we have Emmeline, and I'm just not sure whether to laugh about it or not. You know, I'm mixed. It's like, alas, and shall we see him nevermore, and all the names of this artwork. But just in case I wasn't sure, Huck gets up that morning, and everybody's on the run because the couple has run off together, including Buck and a young cousin. By the way, I noticed, because I was curious about this and I didn't see it maybe the first couple times through this book. It says, Buck looked about as old as me, 13 or 14 or along there. That's how old Huck is. He's 13 or 14 years old. Huck chases them. Why do you think he follows Buck?
Well, he seems to have a liking to him.
Yeah.
I like living there, actually.
He really did. They were good to him. And he likes Buck. They get along wonderfully. And he doesn't want him to get hurt. And he knows it's dangerous, and maybe he can help, maybe. So he climbs up in a tree. As soon as they was out of sight, the men attacking them, the Shepherdsons, I sung out to Buck and told him. He didn't know what to make of my voice coming out of the tree at first. He was awful surprised. He told me to watch out sharp and let him know when the men come inside again. And they was up to some devilment or other, wouldn't be gone long. I wished I was out of that tree, but it dasn't come down. Buck began to cry and rip and loud that him and his cousin Joe, that was the other young chap, make up for this day yet. He said his father and 2 brothers was killed, and 2 or 3 of the enemy. Said the Shepherdsons laid for him in ambush. Buck said his father and brothers ought to have waited for their relations. The Shepherdsons was too strong for him. I asked him what was become of young Harney and Miss Sophia. He said they got across the river and was safe. I was glad of that. But the way Buck did take on because he didn't manage to kill Harney that day he shot at him, I ain't never heard anything like it. All of a sudden, bang, 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 goes 3 or 4 guns. The men had slipped around through the woods and come in from behind without their horses. The boys jumped for the river, both of them hurt. And as they swum down the current, the men run along the bank, shooting at him and singing out, "Kill him, kill him!" It made me so sick I almost fell out of the tree. I ain't a-going to tell all that happened. It'd make me sick again if I was to do that. I wished I hadn't ever come ashore that night to see such things. I ain't ever going to get shut of them. Lots of times I dream about them. Is this funny at all? Oh, this is not funny. This is not funny. So it says, when I got down out of the tree, I crept along down the riverbank a piece and found the 2 bodies laying in the edge of the water and tugged at them till I got them ashore. Then I covered up their faces and got away quick as I could. I cried a little when I was covering up Buck's face, for he's mighty good to me. I don't have anything else to say about that. And suddenly, this book is not funny. I know suddenly, because we've had abusive dad, tried to kill me, going to be sold down the river, murderers on boats being washed up. But suddenly it's very real. It's very real. Okay, he gets back together with Jim, and they get the raft isn't broken. Jim's patched it back up. And I want to read kind of a longish. I'll try to skip around a little bit, several pages. I'm not going to read the whole thing. But he says, it never felt easy till the raft was 2 miles below there and out in the middle of the Mississippi. Then we hung up our signal lantern, and I judged we was free and safe once more. Hadn't had a bite to eat since yesterday, so Jim, he got out some corn dodgers and buttermilk and pork and cabbage and greens. Think nothing in the world's so good when it's cooked right. And whilst I ate my supper, we talked and had a good time. I was powerful glad to get away from the feuds, and so was Jim to get away from the swamp. We said there weren't no home like a raft, after all. Other places do seem so cramped up and smothery, but a raft don't. You feel mighty free and easy and comfortable on a raft. 2 or 3 days and nights went by, but I reckon I might say they swum by. They slid along so quiet and smooth and lovely. Here's the way we put in the time. There's a monstrous big river down there, sometimes half a mile and a half wide. We run nights and laid up and hid daytimes. As soon as night was most gone, we stopped and tied up, nearly always in dead water under a towhead, and then cut young cottonwoods and willows and hid the raft with them. Then we set out the lines. Next, we slid into the river and had a swim, so as to freshen up and cool off. Then we sat down on the sandy bottom where the water was about knee deep and watched the daylight come. And then he has this beautiful, beautiful description of sunrise. And the birds start to sing. And he says, a little smoke couldn't be noticed now, so we'd take some fish off the lines and cook up a hot breakfast. Afterwards, we'd just watch the lonesomeness of the river and kind of lazy along, and by and by lazy off to sleep. Wake up by and by and look to see what done it. Maybe see a steamboat coughing along upstream, so far off towards the other side you couldn't tell nothing about her, only whether she was stern wheel or side wheel. Then for about an hour there wouldn't be nothing to hear or nothing to see, just solid lonesomeness. As soon as it was night out, we shoved. When we got her out in the middle, we let her alone and let her float wherever the current wanted her to. Then we lit the pipes and dangled our legs in the water and talked about all kinds of things. We was always naked, day and night, whenever the mosquitoes would let us. The new clothes Buck's folks made for me was too good to be comfortable. And besides, I didn't go much on clothes, no how. So what's life like on the raft? How does Huck feel? How does Jim feel? What is life like for them?
They like it.
Yeah. Why do you think they like it so much? What's good about it? Yeah.
Nobody to stop them.
Nobody can tell us what to do. Now, are they in danger?
Yeah.
They are. Jim has a price on his head. Huck will get in big trouble if they find out he's helping a slave escape. Not to mention that a steamboat or a riverboat tried to bash their raft for fun. This is why they hang the signal light, right? Even now, if you're out on a boat at night, you're supposed to have a light of some sort because other bigger craft will ram you accidentally and they don't see you there. So it's dangerous, but they don't feel it. They just do whatever they want. What happens when they leave the raft? Almost every single time. Something bad. They get off the raft and get on that wrecked ship. And Jim says, no, not a good idea. They do it anyway. They got away, but barely. It was not good. They leave the raft again, and they end up in the middle of just a violent feud. Till the next time they leave the raft, unfortunately, they don't get away from the problem, because the problem comes with them. The king and the duke. Why do they say? Do you believe they're really a king and a duke?
No.
Oh, well, heavens, no. He is not the lost king of France, and he is not a duke. And so the Bridgewater, he says he's the Duke of Bridgewater, but does everybody know what Bilgewater is?
The water goes to the bottom of the boat.
The water, the nasty water that collects, that seeps in the bottom of a boat with stuff floating, and it's all nasty and dirty and it stinks. It's kind of like not sewage. It's like a step above sewage. So he calls him Bilgewater. It's an insult. And I don't think he doesn't remember that it's Bridgewater. I think it's just what he's like. Hey, Bilgewater. So every time he says this is a joke. How do they make a living?
Basically,
By essentially ripping people off.
Ripping people off. They are con men. Does anybody, this has nothing to do with Huck Finn, but it just popped into my head. Does anybody know what con is short for? It's actually an abbreviation, a con man.
Against?
No, that's a really good guess. They used to call them their whole name. They used to call them confidence tricksters. Confidence. It's short for confidence. They win your confidence. They con you, and it's sort of morphed over time to where con is sort of its own word, but it was confidence. They gain your confidence. So give me an example of something that they've done to make money. They've gained people's confidence in what way?
Like when Peter, the one brother, died,
Okay, we'll circle back around because that one's still going on. In the place where you left off reading for this week, it's the place I told you to leave off. This isn't over yet. So this is a major one. What's another one they did?
They're gonna help pirates.
Okay, yeah, when he went to a missionary, a church, a revival meeting, he's like, oh, I was a pirate and I washed up ashore and I'm going to go back, I'm going to convert all the pirates. Like, take up a collection. And while he's doing that, while the king is doing that, the duke is set up in a printing house and he's taking subscriptions for a newspaper that he's not going to print. Like, if you pay me in cash now, it's like half price. It's like, oh, yeah. And then he just leaves. He just leaves. Yeah, apparently they have sold medicinal potions, which aren't very medicinal. And they do a little acting on the side.
The acting.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, so does Huck think they're really nobility?
No.
Oh, no. Huck's ignorant, but he's not stupid. He says, it didn't take me long to make up my mind that these liars weren't no kings or dukes at all, but just low-down humbugs and frauds. But I never said nothing, never let on, kept to myself. It's the best way. Then you don't have no quarrels and don't get into no trouble. If they wanted to call them kings and dukes, I had no objections, as long as they keep peace in the family. And it weren't no use to tell Jim, so I didn't tell him. If I never learnt nothing else out of Pap, I learnt that the best way to get along with his kind of people is to let them have their own way. He knows exactly, this is Pap's kind of people. This is Pap's kind of people. You let them have their own way. They want me to call them Duke and King, you do it. So he decides they're going to do a performance, and some of you have read this with me, some of you have not. Where is it? Oh. Did I not mark it? Oh, okay, here we go. He's going to make the king learn the Hamlet to be or not to be soliloquy. Now, many of you have read Hamlet with me, and some of you have read the other play that unfortunately gets mixed into the... Does anybody remember, till Burnham Wood do come to Dunsinane, the line, murders the innocent sleep, wake Duncan with thy knocking, I would thou couldst.
Macbeth.
He's mixed Macbeth into it. He's collated lines from Macbeth into Hamlet's to be or not to be speech. And he doesn't have the whole speech, but it's most of it, but it's just every once in a while there's a line from Macbeth. Randomly. Yes. So are they good actors? They are not good actors. They don't really do well with the Shakespearean revival, so towards the end they decide to do the Royal Nonsuch, which is apparently the king taking off all his clothes and painting himself all different colors and prancing around on his hands and knees for a few minutes and then leaving the stage. Does anybody remember how they make sure people come? They put something on the advertisement.
They tell them to bring other people.
Well, no, but the first night, what do they say? No women or children allowed. Like, this is going to be wild. Can't have women and children in here. It's like, whoa, what are they going to do? So the men come, and then he comes out, and they laugh, but then he leaves like, what the heck? We just paid. Like, oh, tell your friends. And they're like, oh, let's lynch him. I'm like, no. Let's get everybody else in here, and so they'll be suckers too. Which they do. King and the Duke know they're going to do it. They collect the money, same thing, and now everybody's been taken in. Third night, what does the audience decide to do? They come with lots of rotten fruit and vegetables to pelt them. Do the King and the Duke know they're going to do that?
Yeah, but they're not even there.
They're not even there. They take the money, and then they slip out the back, and they're already at the raft by the time the people are sitting and waiting for them to come out ready. I kind of admire it a little bit, but it's very, very immoral. Don't do that. But it does make me laugh. So these are the kind of guys that we're dealing with. And so they stop at a place. And are they funny?
They're
I mean, I think I find them funny. Do you think Mark Twain means us to find them funny?
Yeah.
Like the stupid Macbeth mashup with Hamlet and the Royal Nonsuch and then they're gonna paint Jim blue or green and say he's a sick Arab, harmless when not out of his head or something like nobody's gonna bother you now. It's really very funny. So they stop next place down the river, and there's this sleepy town. Everybody's lounging on porches and asking for chaws of tobacco from other people, but you never really lend them back. And it's like, oh, isn't this amusing? Then suddenly, this guy named Boggs comes down the street, and he's the town drunk. By the way, I read this. Apparently, Mark Twain, when he was young, saw the town drunk in Hannibal gunned down by somebody. This really happened. So Boggs apparently gets drunk and then he rips on somebody. He just chooses someone to abuse verbally until he passes out and then sobers up. And this time it's Colonel Sherburne. Is Colonel Sherburne someone you mess with?
No.
Apparently not. Because he came out and said, Boggs, I'm done listening to you. I'll give you till 1 o'clock. If you say peep after 1 o'clock, it's over. And everybody's like, oh, Boggs. Somebody go get his daughter. Because Sherburne means business. And at 1 o'clock, Sherburne comes out and just shoots him dead. Just shoots him dead in the road. Suddenly, I'm not reading a funny book again anymore. And what do the townspeople decide to do? We're going to go to Colonel Sherburne's house and we're going to string him up. We're going to punish him. That was murder. How'd they do? Did that work out?
The fight never went away.
He's a pretty tough guy.
Sherburne never said a word, just stood there looking down. The stillness was awful creepy and uncomfortable. Sherburne ran his eye slowly along the crowd. Wherever it struck, the people tried a little to outgaze him, but they couldn't. They dropped their eyes and looked sneaky. Then pretty soon Sherburne sort of laughed. Not the pleasant kind, but the kind that makes you feel like when you're eating bread that's got sand in it. Then he says, slow and scornful, the idea of you lynching anybody, it's amusing. The idea of you thinking you had pluck enough to lynch a man because you're brave enough to tar and feather poor friendless outcast women that come along here. Did that make you think you had grit enough to lay your hands on a man? Why, man's safe in the hands of 10,000 of your kind, as long as it's daytime and you're not behind him. Do I know you? I know you clear through. I was born and raised in the South, and I've lived in the North, so I know the average all round. Average man's a coward. In the North, he lets anybody walk over him that wants to, and goes home and prays for a humble spirit to bear it. In the South, one man, all by himself, has stopped a stage full of men in daytime and robbed the lot. Your newspapers call you a brave people, so much that you think you are braver than any other people, whereas you're just as brave and no braver. Why don't your juries hang murderers? Because they're afraid the man's friends will shoot him in the back in the dark. And it's just what they would do. So they always acquit. And then a man goes in the night with 100 masked cowards at his back and lynches the rascal. Your mistake is that you didn't bring a man with you. That's one mistake, and the other is you didn't come in the dark and fetch your masks. You brought part of a man, Buck Harkness there, and if you hadn't had him to start you, you'd have taken it out in blowing. You didn't want to come. The average man don't like trouble and danger. You don't like trouble and danger. But if only half a man, like Buck Harkness there, shouts, lynch him, you're afraid to back down. Afraid you'll be found out to be what you are, cowards. And so you raise a yell and hang yourselves onto that half a man's coattail, come raging up here swearing what big things you're going to do. Pitiful thing out's a mob. That's what an army is. A mob. They don't fight with courage that's born in them, but with courage that's borrowed from their mass and from their officers. But a mob without any man at the head of it is beneath pitiful. Now the thing for you to do is to droop your tails and go home and crawl in a hole. If any real lynching's going to be done, it'll be done in the dark southern fashion. And when they come, they'll bring their masks and fetch a man along. Now leave. and take your half a man with you, tossing his gun up across his left arm and cocking it when he says this. Oh my goodness, did they just have a tongue lashing? First of all, what does Colonel Sherburne think of Southern habits of lynching? When do they do it and how do they do it?
They do it at night.
In the dark in a mask. Because they're cowards. Don't want anybody to know I was involved. Wouldn't want anybody to know. And he says all of them put together doesn't make one man. You can't do anything. And then, did you catch in the middle there? He said, the pitifulest thing is a mob. What did he say is a mob? He compared it to something.
The army.
That's what an army is, a mob. He said they don't fight with their own courage, soldiers. They fight with the courage of the people around them or their officers' courage. Guys, what happened 20 years before Mark Twain is writing this? The Civil War. Everybody reading this, they remember war. They know an army. Mark Twain, Colonel Sherburne, just told us armies are just mobs. They're not really brave. Well, I'm going to have to chew on that for a while. But again, there's nothing funny about Colonel Sherburne. It's kind of like whiplash when you read this book, right? It's like, ha, 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 the king and the duke and the realm and such, and oh, let's shoot down Boggs and then get a lecture about how armies are just mobs and you Southerners are all cowards. And all right, and then the book just flows on. And back to Gabriel, you mentioned the con we left off with. The Wilkses. They are going to pretend to be their long-lost brothers and inherit everything, sell off all the belongings, take the money, and leave. And bilk his 3 daughters out of everything they have. That's plain. One of them is deaf and dumb, so they decide that the Duke's going to be, and they just, like they pretend to do sign language. They just wave their hands around, and it says the Duke, he goo-goos and gagas and makes noises because he's not supposed to be able to talk. Does everybody in the town believe them?
Everyone except the doctor.
Yeah.
Dr. Robinson, like, these guys aren't from England. There's no way these guys are from England. But they've got everyone else fooled, which, I don't know. What's your opinion of the education level of the people in this town?
Pretty low. And most towns actually, they have to fool a lot of people.
Yeah, they really do fool a lot of people. So at one episode, I loved this. He's making up stories to one of the daughters, Huck is, about how they preach in front of the king, and they got a whole team of preachers back in England, and
Like the difference between slaves in England.
yes, and slaves here, and the slaves they can go to church and whatnot. So and the one he calls the harlot because she's got a birth defect here. She suggests that maybe he's not telling the whole truth, and then Mary Jane comes in and says, "Well, we don't treat guests that way. You don't accuse guests of lying." Of course, Huck is totally lying. And then it says Mary Jane got done, and Susan waltzed in, and she gives him a tongue lashing. All right then, says the other girls, you just ask his pardon. She'd done it too, and she'd done it beautiful. She'd done it so beautiful, it was good to hear. And I wished I could tell her 1,000 lies so she could do it again. They may not be educated, but they're very gracious, right? They're polite and gracious. You don't treat strangers that way. Okay, so at the very end of what you read, what's the problem? A problem has suddenly arisen.
Wait, for the Duke or
For the Duke and the King, there is now a problem suddenly.
besides the brothers arrived? The real brothers arrived.
The real brothers have arrived. Whilst they was at it, a steamboat landed, and in about 2 minutes up comes a crowd of whooping and yelling and laughing and carrying on and singing out, "Here's your opposition line. Here's your 2 sets of heirs to old Peter Wilkes." And he pays your money and he takes your choice. You have 2 sets of brothers who both claim to be the heirs. Now, how does Huck feel about this scam? Why not?
Because he's robbing the daughter.
They're really nice girls. They're really good to him, like that apology. They're really, really nice. And he says, and this is the sort that I'm letting those rascals steal their money. These are the sort of people. Do you know, did Huck seem to care about the royal nonsuch and whatnot?
No.
Why do you think he didn't care so much about that?
Just because they purposely participated in it. People did. They were the ones that.
That's a really good point, Dominic. They read the playbill. Nobody forced them to come and pay their money. This is different, isn't it? Those girls are being sucked in sort of against their will. Also, Huck didn't know those other people who got scammed. He knows these girls. He's seen firsthand, these are the sort of people that they steal from. But the last thing I want to mention, and like I said, we're finishing the book this week. I wanted to ask you about this section, which is a little puzzling. Jim is talking about the fact that he, well, first of all, before that, do you remember Huck gives a several-page description of Henry VIII, which is not really all Henry VIII. It's another mashup. It says, yeah, see old Henry VIII, when he was in bloom, he was a blossom. He used to marry a new wife every day and chop off her head the next morning. And he'd do it just as indifferent as if he was ordering up eggs. Fetch up Nell Gwynn, he says. They fetch her up. Next morning, chop off her head, and they chop it off. Fetch up Jane Shore, he says, and up she comes. Next morning, chop off her head, and they chop it off. Ring up Fair Rosamond. Fair Rosamond answers the bell. Next morning, chop off her head. And he made every one of them tell him a tale every night, and he kept that up till he'd hogged 1,001 tales that way. Okay, is that Henry VIII? No, now it's the Arabian Nights. And he put them all in a book and called it the Domesday Book. The Domesday Book is the census that William the Conqueror put together. He says, you don't know kings, Jim, but I know them. And this old rip of iron is one of the cleanest I've struck in history. Well, Henry, he takes a notion he wants to get up some trouble with this country. How does he go at it? Give notice? Give the country a show? No. All of a sudden, he heaves all the tea in Boston Harbor overboard and whacks out a Declaration of Independence and dares them to come on. That's his style. He never give anybody a chance. He had suspicions of his father, the Duke of Wellington. Well, what did he do? Ask him to show up? No, drowned him in a butt of Mamsie like a cat. That's Richard III drowned the princes in a... Okay, so he's got English history, but he's got it all messed up. Okay, so this goes on and on. All I say is kings, and you got to make allowances. Take them all around, they're a mighty ornery lot. It's the way they're raised. And then Jim answers, he says, well, you know, they smell. Jim says, well, sure do smell. He's like, well, we can't help how kings smell. He says, that's just history. Well, anyways, I don't hanker for no more on 'em, Huck. These is all I can stand. It's the way I feel too, Jim. But we got 'em on our hands, and we got to remember what they are and make allowances. Sometimes I wish we could hear of a country that's out of kings. What country are they in? What country are they? I have nothing to say. Do you think Huck doesn't know that there is no king in America? It's a possibility.
Does it? Yeah, because like when his dad's complaining about government, he doesn't say specifically
Yeah.
the rules.
He might think the president is the king.
Yeah, maybe Huck thinks the president is the king. What does it say about, well, Neil mentioned it. You know, his dad, remember Pap used to go on and on and on about how the government was after him, and the government wouldn't let him have his own son's money and let him do whatever he wanted to with it and that sort of thing. Huck is talking, but Mark Twain is talking. Because Mark Twain's making up the words. Out of Huck's mouth, it's sort of, oh, does Huck not know how American government works? But out of Mark Twain's mouth, then I wonder what Mark Twain is saying about the way this government is run, the way the American government is run. Is it no better than having kings? I have no answer. This is an open-ended, just something to think about. It does jump off the page. Like, I wish we could find a country that was out of kings. You live in a country without a king, supposedly. All right. Finish Huck Finn, read the second inaugural, which is much shorter, and choose your essay topic and think about how you might structure it. What are 3 main things you could talk about if you chose that? And that's it, and I'll see you next week. And Jonathan, email me or something, talk to your mom, and if there's an open day that looks really good or week, let me know.